Ships or Shipsy? Only you can decide. Find out more at shipzorz.com. Good morning, everyone, and happy Tuesday. Welcome to another episode of Thoughts and Coffee. Sorry, I am looking off my screen because I just want to make sure that we have gone live on my personal LinkedIn page. We do that through Restream, so sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and I just want to make sure that it works this morning. So I hope that you all had an amazing weekend. I hope that you're having a great week right now. So let's dive in. I want to tell you what's coming up on Let's Talk Supply Chain. I'm actually going live twice today, which I can't wait for because I'm going live a little bit later to talk about pallets with Pallet Alliance and Procurement Foundry. But before I do that, let's talk about the newest episode for this week. So this week's episode is Let's Collaborate. Everybody knows that I talk about collaboration as the future of business. And for ships, I live that for Let's Talk Supply Chain, but for ships, I also want to live that philosophy. And one of the ways that we're doing that is through partnerships. And so Mercado and I got together for this week's episode to talk about collaboration, to talk about partnerships, what that means for each of our businesses, how we put that together, because I think that it's not only important to talk about collaboration and partnerships, but I also think that it is very important for us to talk about how we're doing it and what that looks like and why it's so important. So if you want to go and check that out, that's episode 171. We also have a brand new mini series happening in February, and that is in partnership with BlueJay Solutions. This is our latest episode that was released last Thursday. You're not going to want to miss this one. This one got me super excited because I was talking to Pam about simulations. And we were talking about how you can put together some simulations through their software to find out, maybe what's going to or what's the route less traveled to your customer. So to save you time, to save you money. And the simulations are actually really, really cool. So go and check that out, episode 170 or under the BlueJays mini series as well. Plus, this week, we have a brand new episode of Blended. If you guys have watched Thoughts and Coffee before, you know that Blended is my new podcast. That's right. It's separate from Let's Talk Supply Chain. It's my new podcast called The Blended Podcast about diversity and inclusion, where a bunch of people from different walks of life come together and we talk about the different topics in diversity and inclusion. This week's episode is going to be about the worldwide perspective around diversity and inclusion. And so we've got South America, we've got the UK, we've got Dubai on that episode, and I believe India as well. And so it's super, super interesting. So stay tuned for that. If you are looking for the past episodes, you can subscribe to the Blended Podcast wherever you subscribe to podcasts, or you can find it on the Let's Talk Supply Chain.com under podcasts as well. All right. And then I think last but not least, we want to talk about a couple of different events that are coming up. So next week, I am going live with Ocean Insights and Cisco and Charlie Pesty, and we're going to be talking about visibility and transportation. Now, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of conversations around capacity and equipment shortage. This webinar that I'm doing with them is going to cover all of that. They're gonna talk about the capacity challenges. They're going to be talking about the equipment shortages and how they're getting around that and what that means for their business. So don't miss that one. That's next Tuesday, and you can find the links to register to any of these events. We've pinned it to the top of the Let's Talk Supply Chain LinkedIn page, so go and check that out. We've got all the links there. This afternoon at 1 p.m. Eastern, I am going live on Procurement Foundry to host a panel discussion about pallets. pallets. Pallets are like the unsung heroes of transportation. I feel like they don't get as much love as maybe they should. And so we're going to talk about how important a pallet strategy is to your business and is to your supply chain. So if you want to come and join us, make sure to register. And that's pretty much about it. The last one is February 25th. I'm going to be hosting a discussion at the Forge Supplier Diversity Conference on February 25th as well. So I think that's about all that I needed to cover. There's a lot to cover, and I just want to make sure that I'm letting everybody in on what is happening. Thank you everybody for joining us. I'm going to get to all of your comments in just a minute, but I do want to bring up our guest for today, and that is Christy. Welcome to the show, Christy. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so glad that you could join me today because I think that you bring so much amazingness, right, to the industry. We had a great conversation on Hold My Beer last Thursday. And so I wanted to bring you on the show. I wanted to introduce you to the community. I wanted to talk a little bit about Intermodal with you as well, because I know that's what you guys do at Knichel Logistics. So why don't you do an introduction for everybody who doesn't know you?
Sure. Kristy Knichel. I'm the president and CEO of Knichel Logistics. I'm also majority owner, and we're a woman-owned certified company. So, that's what we do here.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that. And I know you mentor so many women in the industry or people in the industry. You're very, very big on that. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Why is that so important?
Sure. I mean, I think it's important because I'm in my 24th year in the industry. So I started very young when things were a lot different, and things are starting to change, maybe over the last 5 years more significantly. So I think it's important to be able to help other women get through challenges that I didn't really say have that help for per se.
Yeah.
I don't want them having to make mistakes or go through issues when I can be there to help answer some of those questions. I don't know it all, but I do think that being able to put my experience out there with them helps further them along. And it makes me feel good that I'm able to help someone else.
Yeah, and I think on Thursday's episode, you and I figured out that you started 1 year before I did in the industry,
Yes.
which is crazy,
Yeah.
crazy. So 23 years right here, 24 years over there. I mean, lots and lots of time spent in this industry. All right. So the first thing that we're going to get to is the question of the week. And so we ask a question of the week every Wednesday morning across all of our social media. And so that question is, if you could partner with one other business, who would it be and why? And we ask this question to generate conversations in the community. So if anybody wants to answer this question, feel free to do that in the comments below, or you can visit our social media tomorrow and be part of that conversation too.
So, two companies, I know you said one, but I'm going to bring up two just because there's two different reasons why. One, Candor Expedite, which is Nicole Glenn owner. And the reason why is because she's a smaller company than me. And not only am I helping her, but she's also helping me with some things as well. And then another company is Sunset Transportation, Lindsay Graves. And the reason why for that is because she's a lot larger company than me. And same thing, I can learn things from her that I don't already know. And also, I've already helped her too. So I think it's just that whole collaborating, like you like to say, and just helping each other be able to grow.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, that's another reason why we wanted to ask this question this week, because collaboration is so important. And we've seen the power of collaboration and partnerships in 2020. And I think that it's important that we start thinking about who can we partner, and why. Right? What are your goals around that? What does that mean for you? What does that mean for the company? How can we learn from each other? How can we partner with each other so everybody wins? And so for me, because of our episode this week, I'm going to say Mercado, because that is a great partnership for us when it comes to ships. We partner on the Let's Talk Supply Chain side all the time. But for ships, Mercado is one of those companies. They deal with the first mile, we deal with the middle mile, and it really just makes sense for us to, win together. And so I really love your answer. Love Nicole. Hopefully we can get Nicole on the show soon as well. So if everybody wants to just check out that question of the week next week, or no, not next week, tomorrow morning on our social media, please go ahead because we'd love to hear from all of you. I just want to give a shout out to everybody on my personal LinkedIn page. We do it through Restream, so it doesn't come up on the comments. So that we can't put it on the screen, but I do want to give a shout out because I love all the people that are over there right now. And India, good morning. Joe, good morning. Meryl, good morning. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Marina, thank you guys all for joining us over on my personal LinkedIn page. All right. So now we're getting to my thoughts and coffee post. So I post thoughts and coffee, or a thought provoking post every Sunday. And this Sunday, I actually wrote about leadership. And the reason why I did that was because our episode on Hold My Beer last Thursday really sparked that. We talked about leadership. We talked about women in the industry, what it meant to be a woman in the industry, what it meant to be leaders in the industry. And so I did a little bit of digging. I found this Forbes article that actually said that 18% of leaders weren't particularly ready for something like a 2020, and that we need to go from horizontal leadership into vertical type leadership, where we're thinking about our mindsets as leaders. We're thinking about our behavior as leaders and how that transcends rather than just meeting the KPIs. So, Christy, I know I tagged you in this. What did you think of this post, and what would you say about leadership right now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you. I think every leader was challenged going into this year specifically. It was new for a lot of companies. How do we operate outside of our environment that we're typically in? And like you said, we're looking at KPIs and numbers and data, but at the end of the day, we also have to have empathy and reaching out to our people and making sure they're okay. And just what can we do to help you make it a little bit easier for you? Even though sometimes we ask those questions within the office, it was more prevalent with this whole situation going on. And then at the end of the day, too, still looking at the data and KPIs, but understanding what's going on that's causing those numbers to be disrupted. I know one of the things that we talked about was productivity, right? Like, when you're not in the office and being able to collaborate, I think everybody has said that, you lose a little bit of it. So just finding ways to get around that. And I think it's kind of sped up for a lot of companies, changes and things that maybe would have come down the road that weren't here today, but now we had to start looking at things differently, especially with, like I said, women that are in the industry. You have kids that were being homeschooled. So now we're not only working and being moms and, spouses potentially, but now we're teachers on top
Exactly.
of that. Yeah. So, I think it's definitely been challenging, but I will say reaching out to a lot of different people and companies is very helpful as to what everyone is doing and what is working. And even asking your people, well, what do you need from us as well?
Yeah, exactly. I think what really opened my eyes from that article and from writing that post is that there's a lot of work that we have to do on the leadership side. And I think that there are some companies and businesses that are getting it right, but I think also we need to put more time and energy and effort into our leaders because they're the ones that are going to get us through something like a 2020, something like a disruption. And I think, when we talk about looking at teams holistically, I think we also have to look at our leaders holistically. What makes them a good leader? What is that mindset and that mind frame that they need to be in to really lead effectively and to be able to bring their teams together, whether it's in person or virtual or things like that. And one of the things from the article they said was the spine methodology. And so S stands for spiritual, stands for physical, I stands for intellectual. Oh, I wrote intuition, but I think it's supposed to be an N word. And then E is for emotion. And so those were kind of the five things that they had talked about, really focusing on when it comes to leadership and how to build up a good leader. So just to let you guys know, you can go and find that post under my personal profile, Sarah Barnes-Humphrey, under the posts. I literally just posted it a couple of days ago. So hopefully you guys go check it out, because the Forbes article was actually very, very interesting for that. All right. So now we are going to get to our topics. All right, what is our first topic? So this topic I thought would be a great one to talk about, because there's so many people in transition right now, whether they're in supply chain, whether they're not in supply chain, whether they're out of work and trying to figure out what it is that they want to do. And so I was reading through this article talking about career change and what it means. And I'll go through some of the stats in a little bit. But Christy, when I sent this article to you, what did you think about this?
I thought it was interesting because my story always starts with my first career, really with, I don't know if you want to call it a career, but was running a pizza shop and wanting to buy a pizza shop. And then here I am in logistics, and now I own a logistics company. But yeah, it made me think that, like, you know, when you're younger and you're 18, you graduate high school, go to college, or you don't go to college, I think everybody has an idea maybe of what they want to do. Sometimes they don't. And then sometimes I think, you know, there's a couple people I know that, you know, wanted to get into nursing, but then once they get into that particular job, they realize this isn't really what I want to do. So I think it's actually, you know, great, because sometimes you don't realize the stress or the way that the job is, for example, because I was reading about where some people have changed their career and now they're not as stressful and they have more time for family. You know, and I sit there and think, okay, yeah, I get stressed out a lot, but I'm not changing my career right now. So, but no, I mean, I think it's great, and it's great to be in a career for a long period of time, just so you can kind of work up the chain. But in the same aspect, if it's not making you happy, then you probably aren't going to do a great job either. So I think it was a great article.
Yeah, yeah. So just over on my personal LinkedIn page, Joe actually saw my sign. So I put together, and I'm going to get back to the article in a second, but I put together this sign in ode to Christy and her team and how they kick butt in Intermodal. I needed to find a train quote. So anyways,
Love it.
so thank you, Joe, for picking up on that sign. And Jeffrey, I want to say good morning as well. So going back to this article, there was a couple of things. I mean, a lot of people know my career shift, where I was working for my dad's company. We closed the doors. I had already started the podcast. And so I transitioned into the podcast. So it was kind of one of those forced career changes, but I'm glad that it did. I always had side hustles, but never really made the leap to do it on my own. And so that was kind of my career shift. But I think what's interesting too is there's a lot of people looking to transition from different parts of supply chain. So maybe logistics into procurement, or maybe sourcing into procurement. Maybe it's last mile into distribution. And I think that obviously it's not too late to be able to do that. And that's what some of this article really talks about. It also talks about how we should have multiple professions in our lifetime, which is so different. And you're probably going to agree with me on this, Christy, so different from how you and I grew up, right? The conversation, and I grew up with two entrepreneurial parents. I mean, and you grew up with an entrepreneurial parent. But even so, those questions or those conversations were, okay, so you're going to go to college, university, you're going to get a job for life, you're going to have babies, you're going to get married. Well, not in that order, but anyways, that was the conversations that we were having. And it was like, you were going to stay in that one job forever and ever and ever, because that's what they did before us. And now this article is talking about how important it is. And what they also said, which I really liked from this article, is that you have to set aside your ego to become a nobody again, to really do a career shift. When I read that, it totally resonated with me because I can tell you, I went from director of sales and marketing in my dad's company to somebody who was trying to build a podcast that nobody had heard of. And you really have to let go of that title. You have to let go of that ego to be able to make that shift and to start all over again. And so those were just some of my comments from this. If you do go to this article, there's a lot of really great stats. So this one that's on the screen right now, how long had you been in your previous profession? They had done a survey over, I think, 600 people that subscribe to The Hustle. What was the primary reason you made the switch? 21% said boredom. I mean, that's a huge telltale. And this one was a really big one too. Do you think with the benefit of hindsight, you made the right decision to swap careers? 97% of people said yes. So really, really interesting article. I would highly recommend going to check that out. The article is in the comments. So really, really easy to find. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great conversation happening over on our LinkedIn and our Facebook. Meryl says, absolutely, you don't know the intricacies of the role until you're in it. Absolutely. Rhonda says, transitions bring about new opportunities to explore. So awesome. Awesome. And Joe is coming through on YouTube. Humility is key to a career change. So thank you to everybody for commenting on that one. Really enjoyed that article. Next, we are moving on to drones. All right. I love drones. My old co-host on the show loved drones. We talked about drones all the time in season 1, but we were nowhere close to where we are right now. Christy, what do you think of drones?
I mean, I love drones too. I can remember years ago when that was like a gift we got my husband, and he loved it. We actually did a trade show, and that was actually one of our giveaways. You had to give your business card, and we were giving away a drone. So yeah, I mean, I think they're great. Obviously, I think the challenge is still going to be, the privacy issues. I know that they still issues of people wanting to shoot them down out of the sky, or it's carrying a package. Not that they're not going to have visibility to that type of stuff, but it's definitely interesting to kind of see how this is going to work, and if it's only going to work in certain areas or for specific things. Maybe it's still too early to tell, but yeah, defintanning interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought the privacy point up. I talk about this all the time because if I'm in my backyard and I'm, suntanning or whatever, and a drone goes over and there's film, like, who decides what happens with that film and what happens? Because that is invading my privacy and I don't get the option to know where that is being taken and what's being done with it. And that is one of my biggest problems with drones.
Yeah, I agree with you, because I have a pool too that I lay out, and actually I know our neighbor he's into tech, and he's got a drone that he has out there. And yeah, I mean, good point. I mean, there's a lot of privacy issues there, and I just don't know how they're going to get past that, but I'm sure at some point they'll figure it out.
Yeah, well, so this article actually talks about some of the rules and what FAA is putting into place. One of them is a digital license plate. They're saying that 3 companies right now, UPS, Amazon, and Wing, they're the only ones that have regulatory approval. Wing is going full bore on the FAA because it doesn't agree with those rules. And this article talks a little bit about why. The other thing that I thought was really funny is at the end of the article, it says the buzzing you'll hear outside in 2023 is drones. You're not going crazy. Which I loved. I thought that was great. And I mean, at the end of the day, we do need to find different ways to be able to deliver the products. I mean, I was just talking to somebody the other day that the e-commerce orders have, I don't know, something like tripled in January. Yep. And the capacity is just like everybody's just scrambling of, how do we get those orders out? How do we get those orders delivered, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So lots of conversations happening around last mile delivery and what's happening in e-commerce right now. I want to go back to the job thing for just a second, because Azalea over on my personal LinkedIn page says, what is the easiest sector of supply chain to get your career started in? Some divisions seem to ask for more experience than others. In my experience, Azalea, I would say logistics, so international transportation is a great way to start your career, and you're going to learn so much because you'll be able to learn air freight and ocean freight, how products are moving internationally. Christy, I don't know if you want to jump in on that one.
Yeah, so what you just said, it obviously is not my expertise. So, once you learn the one, then all the pieces come together. So we were just talking about that here, starting in, whether it's intermodal or truck brokerage, it's, usually most companies do bring you in maybe on a customer service level, or we're bringing in people like tracking and tracing, like whether it's trucks for the LTL, the truck side, or the intermodal.
Right.
And then because then you can kind of see how it's going, and then you start moving up and learning different aspects of it. And then it just kind of easily comes together, and you truly understand how pricing works and just how all the different pieces come together for the customer.
True, true. So I hope that answered your question, Azalea. That was a great question. And thanks so much for joining us this morning. All right. One last article. So, in honor of Christy and what they do at Knichel Logistics, they do a ton of intermodal. And maybe you can talk a little bit more about what you do on the intermodal side. And so I wanted to talk about this article from JOC. They're talking about how the intermodal growth will likely slow later in 2021. There's a lot of conversations around capacity on the international side, especially in ocean freight. Lots of vessels stuck in the port. And so when you saw this article, walk me through what's happening in intermodal right now and what we're going to be seeing for 2021.
Yeah, so just to kind of rewind back to 2020 when the pandemic happened, that's when things started to shift. Obviously, the railroad didn't have as much business because companies had to shut down. Containers were being stored, locomotives, all of that stuff. So when the business started to come back a few months later, basically more retail type business, those were the customers we had that were shut down. So that really kind of caused a lot of chaos because with the railroads, things are not very fast. So to get the containers back out, to get chassis out, locomotives out, the customers that we're still shipping, things are just in different areas that they wouldn't typically be in, meaning like maybe there was more containers on the East Coast versus the West Coast. And then there was a lot of backup, obviously. I know my company had the best first quarter we ever had, most companies I talked to. So it was busy. People were spending money. So when things started to really come on strong, it was difficult with the e-commerce. So e-commerce really started to boom with consumers buying from home and having those pieces shipped. So specifically with the Union Pacific, which we ride on for most of our freight, they're in tight now with a lot of the e-commerce, your UPS, your Amazon, the stuff that's going FedEx and whatnot. Their priority with the railroad or premium service. So customers like myself and my customers, were really hit hard. It was tough to get capacity on the rail. The prices went through the roof, sometimes tripled to even move a product. Obviously, in some lanes that should have been really good to ship intermodal, truck was actually cheaper than intermodal. So everything was kind of out of whack. And the one thing I'll say that is great is, building the network and the relationships that we've had with carriers. That has really helped us get through the tough times because your LA market, Northern California, Chicago, going to New York, Georgia, Memphis, those are all points that are, big interchanges or big cities for rail to go into. So there was challenges into all those areas. We saw challenges that I've never seen in my career where we had shutdowns at rails, like in New Jersey, for example, where they had to shut down the terminal. We couldn't, if we had a box in Chicago, they're sitting on a train for a week sometimes, couldn't ship it because they're trying to clear out what's already at the ramp. There's just no room. So, one thing I would say is that it's great that it's this busy, but it's been the most challenging time that we've ever seen. I think our people are doing approximately 20% more work with the same amount of freight, which means a lot of overtime, a lot of frustrating customers. The railroads are doing the best that they can working with us, but it's just been challenging all around. And I think because there was so many delays due to customers being shut down for a few months, and when everything kind of came back on board, there's still that pent up demand that's still sitting out there, like you said, on the ships off the coast, still need to come into distribution centers. I think the telltale story is going to be, once we hit the middle of the year, I think, as that article states, we'll start to see a slowdown to an extent, but a lot of it's also going to be consumer, right? Like, are the consumers out there still buying goods?
Yeah.
Do they have what they need? Are they going to have the money? Are people still out of jobs? How are things going because of the COVID situation specifically?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other part of it too is when it talks about if we're able to go out to, say, more restaurants and concerts, and if people feel like they're able to do that and we're allowed to do that, from a state level, or whatever the situation is, I think that's also going to play a part too, because I can tell you one of my biggest things is going to concerts, and I had to cancel concerts last year. So, I'm going to be spending money going to concerts if I can too. So how does that look on the product side? Are people, going to slow down on that? And, so we'll see. I still think Intermodal is going to be in a good position as far as they're going to have to, we're seeing decreased pricing now in some lanes, and that's going to, drive what goes forward. If it is cheaper to ship on the rail side than a truck, say second half of the year, then that's going to still be a really viable option for customers looking to save money because of what they spent last year, because budgets got blown out.
Yeah. And I think, the reduction and what they're talking about is really just a stabilization, right? We have seen so much of this and so much of this that I think things just need to stabilize. And when they talk about how it's going to be, how the growth is going to slow, I think it's really just a matter of stabilizing everything. Well, listen, we have come to the end of our show. If anybody wants to talk more about Intermodal, please reach out to Christy. She is on LinkedIn, Kristy Knichel, or you can reach out to them at Knichel Logistics. Thank you to everybody who joined us for this conversation this week. Audrey Ross will be back with me next Tuesday morning on Thoughts and Coffee. We hope you have an amazing week, and just happy that you could all join us. And thank you, Christy, for being on the show today.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all the listeners.